Welcome back to Tort Talk. We are here today with incredibly special guests. We have the Kelsey Stokes and David Hobbs. We're going to talk about hernia mesh and all of the things that are happening with this litigation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those of you who don't know much about hernia mesh, talking to Kelsey, talking to David, like this is the group that's going to be able to provide all the information about the litigation, where it is right now and where it's going. So why don't we start kind of like what we were talking about right before we started rolling. There's transvaginal mesh, there's hernia mesh. Let's make sure that everyone understands exactly what we are talking about and what litigations are still currently active.
Sure, yeah, transvaginal mesh, to be clear, is a different litigation, okay? But also, it's important to know that all of these manufacturers developed transvaginal mesh off of already existing products in their hernia mesh line. There are significant similarities, in fact, so much so that in the Bard litigation, in the Bard MDL, we had a 2-day hearing with multiple experts to actually address the topic of how hernia mesh and transvaginal mesh were related. And the judge ruled that we could bring in evidence from transvaginal mesh. That said, it's a different approach, different location in the body. And so I don't want anybody to misconstrue these litigations as the same. Of course, the material is very similar, and the repair sites are in soft tissue, so the inflammatory response is similar. However, transvaginal mesh has significant implications because of the sensitive location where it's implanted anatomically.
Yeah, and so you talked a little bit about Bard hernia mesh. I think it was a little bit more than a year ago when you first announced the great result, the global settlement. So if you could, you and David maybe talk a little bit about that settlement, what's going on. And I know you guys have probably been spending most of your time over the last year on that. Where are we? And what should we look forward to going forward?
So we did a lot of work on the Bard settlement. We announced it in, I believe it was early October of 2024. And since then, and to be clear, that settlement involves about 40,000 plaintiffs. Can't talk too much about the specifics, obviously. But since that time, Plaintiffs' Counsel has done a tremendous job of getting in the necessary data to prove up the injuries that are going to be compensated pursuant to the agreement. So what I can say is we are on schedule. Everything is going very well. We are working really well with Bard's counsel, and I can't stress enough, actually, how much of a cooperative environment we have with Bard's counsel on this. And so I just want to give a shout out to them, and also the special masters have done a tremendous job. David Hobbs over here, is ministering counsel with me, and Mike Russo and John Orant with Motley Rice. We have done so much work, and the email traffic. I mean, Hobbs, how much of your day is spent on this?
Yeah, no, we easily spend 20 to 30 to 50% of a day on questions from case counsel, questions on how to submit information, what type of information to submit, like what is the case status. And so it really is, it has been a lot. And we've done a lot of training. We have to do a lot of training to make sure that when these claims get looked at, when the records get looked at, that the injuries that are covered in the settlement are actually accounted for correctly, that they're being judged correctly. And so we have to do a lot of that.
Very, very interesting how like the settlement gets announced and that's not the finish. It's not even close to the finish.
No, and that is such a good point. The clients need to be managed on that topic, actually. There's the litigation, which takes its own amount of time, right? Depending on the defendant, depending on how the bellwethers go, that can be anywhere from, 2 years if you're lucky, to 7-8 years. But then you have, once the settlement is inked, what happens then? The administration of the settlement that involves, in particular, the volume of claimants in Bard, and frankly, in any mass tort settlement. Once that settlement is inked, that administration can take up to 2 to 3 years. And so clients need to be managed on that process. And nobody is doing anything wrong. I know claimants get very angry because they say, you have a deal. Why haven't we received anything? Counsel is doing everything, meeting the deadlines, and it's just the way the process works.
And I think what you guys have done with Bard is pretty remarkable. John and I and Mark always talk about that 10,000 number in mass torts. Like, we think that's a big one. This is about 4 times that. But as part of Bard, there's about 20 different products involved, and there's a number of different injuries. So David, like, how do those cases get evaluated? Like, it's on an individual basis for each client?
Not only is it on an individual basis, but you have to look at the specific product and what it's done for this specific person. And because the liability theories, while there's overlap, they are different for each product. Some products have rings. And so you're looking, okay, am I looking for a buckled product? Am I looking for a fractured ring? What has this done? Or if you're looking at a plug case, you're looking, okay, you're usually in the groin, you're in the inguinal space, and you're looking, what type of inflammatory process is there? And there's a very different set of injuries that you'll see with each product, and a very different way the defects in the design of the product will manifest themselves. And so you have to look at that.
And that's what makes the administration, and it's been really well done by you guys. I'm not just saying that because you're here, but as somebody on the outside from leadership, that I think I have a decent number of cases, being able to process them and getting them done, it's remarkable when you compare the complexity of the settlement to, say, a roundup where it's one signature injury. That's much easier to process.
I can't say enough. We meet, administering counsel and the special masters meet at a minimum of once a week. So Ellen Reisman, John Jackson, Adrian Tice, and Doug Schreiner. Oh my gosh, can't tell you enough how much they have helped us in guiding claimants' counsel and in establishing procedures and processes throughout this whole litigation and the administration of the settlement.
I think you're underselling it. I think we meet at minimum 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah,
honestly,
we do. So, that's going well, and everything, we are on track. And so I just want everyone to know that. And if they have any questions, we can't really talk much more than what we have about the details. But if they have any questions, please contact us, and you should have our contact information.
And you guys are always available and very responsive. So we appreciate that. And, that was the big one last year. The biggest settlement, the biggest hernia mesh one to date. And so the other one that we're all kind of working on now is another manufacturer. So it's Covidien, and kind of how I explain it to clients is hernia mesh, it's like cars. There's all of these different manufacturers. There's GM, there's Ford, there's Covidien, there's Bard. And then within each manufacturer, there's a line of products, right? There's a Ford Mustang, there's a Ford F-150, there's a, Covidien PCOX. There's a ProGrip. So each one of these, they're so nuanced. But what we have going on in Covidien is there's kind of parallel actions like we always see in mass torts. MDL, Kelsey's leading that as well. And then in state court in Massachusetts. And so right now, my firm has the first bellwether trial scheduled in January of 26, about 6 weeks out. So we're really, knee deep in that, doing the expert motions, trying to get some of the motion eliminate filed and arguments coming up in about a month. So while we're working on that, Kelsey, what do you guys have going on in MDL? How big is it?
First of all, every time we have a case management conference, the judge says, these just keep coming. They keep coming. They get filed every day. When is this going to stop? And my answer was always, well, these products are still on the market. These products are still injuring plaintiffs. And so it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop until we're able to come to some sort of resolution on these. So the MDL is approaching over 3,000 cases, and I see that as growing by the day. Our approach to the MDL versus different a little bit from the Massachusetts State Court approach, which bifurcated the monofilament cases versus the multifilament cases. What we did is we're pursuing it all. There's multifilament, and Covidien is particularly confusing because of all of the products that start with the word Pariatex. So there's Pariatex ProGrip, there's Pariatex Optimized Composite, and what that Pariatex is simply their way of labeling something as polyester based versus Pariatine. There's a Pariatine ProGrip, there's Pariatine flat mesh. And so it's a very confusing litigation for case counsel to know. But what we have done is we have created buckets, essentially. So there's buckets where there is the resorbable barrier products meant for ventral hernia repair. And those are meant to be placed right up against the bowel. And so that coating, and it's a collagen-based coating, when that coating goes away, it's supposed to be there to protect the bowel during this critical healing process known as reperitonealization. I know that's a mouthful, but essentially, once that peritoneum is breached and placed right against the bowel, there's this process of remesothelialization, also known as reperitonealization, and that is supposed to protect the bowel once that occurs. But there's this coating that's supposed to stay on there until that process is complete. Most surgeons will tell you at a minimum, that coating's supposed to last for 30 days. For various patient factors, etc., they want that coating to last for 30 days. Well, we, throughout discovery, have learned that the science behind it and what Covidien knew was that coating actually lasted 7 days or less. And so what happens when that occurs is dense adhesions that lead to bowel obstruction, necessitating bowel resections, fistulae occur, etc. And so that's one of the buckets. The other bucket is the ProGrip, or the inguinal bucket. The ProGrip is a very unique product. They label it as the self-gripping mesh. And it's a bunch of 1,000 little micro grips that act like Velcro. And those micro grips do not resorb during the duration that they actually represent that it resorbs. So they stay there for about 18 months. And during that time, the amount of pain that the patient perceives because of these micro grips just hooking into these really nerve-rich structures in the groin, it's excruciating. It causes an excessive amount of fibrosis or scar tissue, and that leads to pain. And then we also have just the bare, polyester base. You've got this highly inflammatory base polymer that frankly should not be used in any humans ever. Funny story is when we were doing the BARD MDL, which is a polypropylene based polymer, we always wanted, you have to get that safer alternative. And when we were talking to experts, we would say, okay, so what do you think about this as a safer alternative? What do you think about that? Whenever polyester-based meshes would come up, they would say, nope,
Right.
no, it's criminal. We will not support that polyester should ever be placed in the human body. So those are our buckets. That's what we're doing. Our first case is a plaintiff picks bellwether case, which is in February. It's a Symbitex case. And this patient, oh my goodness, this man was severely injured. He still actually has an exposed piece of this mesh that just leaks every day. He's had multiple surgeries, and this gentleman is very injured. We have a really good set of experts set up. We just finished Daubert briefing, just finished the MSJ response actually right when I landed in Vegas. I encourage anybody to go to the docket and read that MSJ response because we laid out our case for punitive damages very nicely there.
Which of those three buckets does that case fall into?
That would be the coating, the resorbable coating that they call an adhesion barrier that's supposed to protect the bowel, and it didn't.
The collagen barrier.
Yeah.
And that's why these cases are so complex. Like the injury you're dealing with is totally different than the one I have in my case. So it's a different theory, different products.
To be clear, still the underlying polymer is polyester, and that is highly inflammatory. And what that does to the body is absolutely insane. It's like a ticking time bomb for anybody who has that.
And we talked, John, before about how these trial dates is kind of really what's going to drive the litigation. So it's going to be on to this next phase. So we're excited to hear from Kelsey and David, what happens in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, like making movement in both the state hearings as well as the federal hearings. They could affect each other, right?
Oh yeah, it's always good. And I want to be clear, it is always good to have multiple pressure points. And we have Massachusetts State Court, and you got the monofilament, multifilament, combination. Then we got the MDL in DMAS. And then we also have a little Minnesota State Court action too. And so these poor counsel, they're just getting hit left and right by us. And that's never a bad thing.
Thank you guys so much for keeping everybody up to date what's going on with these litigations. We've got a lot of activity here going in the beginning of 2026, and hopefully we can come to like a great resolution for the plaintiffs on all of these cases.
We're working on that every day.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you so much for
David.
having us, by the way.
Absolutely.